Look at some end games tonight. I was thinking of like material, like basically material inequality and sort of how that ends up fitting into how to play end games. Um, I also was thinking of maybe potentially playing viewers if they were interested, and then doing like a game analysis. But it really depends on how many people show up. So what I'm really curious about is kind of how to play like an endgame bishop versus knight, or basically unequal position type endgames, is what I was curious about. So in setting this up, I was thinking that I could clear this off and then set up kind of a more, basically a larger endgame position, and we could just take a look at it. So here I was thinking, this is basically a classic from basic chess endgames, and just wanted to take a look. Hey, welcome, Limestone. Um, so I was thinking about this as an idea, Limestone, or anyone else who's here. Did anyone want to play a game and then do like an analysis afterwards? I was thinking maybe we could do like a live game and then like an analysis afterwards. Is that something that people would be interested in, or is that more, or is that difficult and not, or would you guys rather have kind of an end game lecture? It's up to you. I'm gonna start the end game lecture, but if you guys are interested in playing a game instead. Okay, cool. Yeah. I mean, if anyone wants to challenge me, I can just play and I can play. How about this? How about we do like a simul, and we can take the first 3 games that come up. Does that work for everybody? I'm still trying to work out the simul, so I was thinking maybe I could just take the first 3 challenges, 3 minutes aside, and then we could take a look at the games. So if you guys want to send in challenges now, we could do like I'll take the first 3 challenges, and then I was thinking 3 minutes aside, and then we could take the games from there. So, and then just go over them really quick. They'll probably be shorter than regular analysis, but we could go and run through them. So yeah, if anyone wants to send a 3-0 to me on chess.com, we can take a look at that. And I'll take, I guess, the first 3 challenges to do it. Okay, yeah, it's just any 3-minute game I'll accept. I'll just take the first 3 that come in. It's Ted Belanoff. It's just like that. Yeah, I'll take the first 3 challenges that come in. I'll simul them, and then we can take a look at those games and run through them really quick. This is just me trying something out. I don't know how good it's going to be or how well it'll work, but I thought that might be a good way to do like an individual, like a quick individual lesson. I also am really curious about chess.com's simul feature. So if anyone wants to challenge me to 3-0, I will accept the first 3 challenges that come in, and then simul them, and then we'll do like a lesson related to them. So yeah. I guess until they start coming in, I can get started on this endgame lecture. This endgame lecture is interesting. It's basically like, it has to do with like, okay, cool. All right, we'll just go straight to the games then. So we 2 more challenges to come in. Match me to 3-0, and I'll accept them. Okay, yeah, sure. That's a good idea. They might auto-abort, though. That's what I'm wondering. It's okay. We can just start. I mean, I'm fine. Uh, oh yeah, they have that weird rating thing, right? Okay, cool. All right, good luck, Limestone. And then if other people show up, we can do a 3-0, or we can do another simul. And if it doesn't, then we can just do an analysis of this game. If anyone else wants to challenge me, I'm playing user games, and then we were gonna take a look at the games and do an analysis afterwards. So if anyone wants to send a challenge of a 3-minute game, I'll accept it. Okay, cool. Thanks, Dan. And then if there's one more, I said I was gonna take the first 3 that came in. We're up to 2, so we got room for one more game. One more 3-0 game if anyone wants to send it. I'll accept the challenge, and then we can do a game review after. One more if we want, or we could just do 2, I guess. But I was thinking, if we could get one more player to send a challenge in, we could take a look and do a review of 3 different games. One more game. If anyone wants to send a 3-0 challenge, I'll take it in, and we can do a lesson off of it. Okay. One more. Do you want to play one more, Limestone? One more game, one more 3-0 game I was thinking, and then we can make that all part of the lesson. Sure, yeah, rematch me, and then we can play one more, and then that will be at 3 games for the night. Yeah, these games are interesting. Like I think having multiple openings is pretty big here too. Okay, good game. All right, maybe we'll just stop at 2 then, since no one sent in a third one. So yeah, thank you very much for the games, Dan Wilkins and Limestone. And with those games, let's do a lesson. You know, are you guys cool if we do like an analysis of these games, or just you know, take a look? There were 2 different openings that got played. I think that we can definitely do some good opening study off of that. And cool, awesome, yeah. So let's take a look. Limestone sent the one in first, so let's or sent the first challenge. So going in order, let's take a look at Limestone's game first. Basically, Limestone here starts off with the ready. Okay, so the ready is an interesting opening. Basically, it's likely to transform or transpose into a an D5 opening. It's usually transpositional. The more ready-like lines, the ones that are specifically the ready, are things like C5, Sicilian Invitation, and then like this will transpose into the English. You know, if you play offbeat lines, it'll stop in terms of ready analysis. But here, yeah, G6, Bishop to F4, D5, and basically here, you know, we're kind of in very well-established theory. So the first thing in this game, so basically we're playing a London system type game, early Bishop to F4, Indian game, London system, and these basically pieces are developed to relatively normal squares. Bishop to G7 is coming, C6 is probably going to get played the engine might push for c5 by black and aggressive c5 by black. So yeah, that's interesting. So I'm thinking that bishop to g7 is probably going to be the next move for black. So the first thing is, I think that this is a little bit early to play queen to d2. So queen to d2 was the move that was played in the game. I don't know if queen to d2 is necessarily that bad. It looks like queen to d2 versus the next, versus the next best move is, or the first best move is 0.75. That's the difference in terms of objective eval, 0.75 total. But I think here, basically, if we're going back on this, this opening theory, there's 1875 games, and queen to d2 was not played this early in those games. So I think that queen to d2 is definitely going to be a possible resource for white going forward. But I think that that now, for reasons that include knight to e4, queen to d2 is a little bit early to be played. So with queen to d2, we're taken out of opening theory, and it's an interesting game. So I'm thinking that bishop to g7 is probably what black wants to do. Just continue standard development. Yeah, bishop to g7, and then bishop to h6, which I think was played here, right? Or actually, sorry, no, c6. But we're out of opening theory. c6 is probably not as good as bishop to g7. I played c6. Engine says bishop to g7, but I think it's probably not as good for black. Bishop to h6 is very aggressive. So this is an interesting idea. Trading off, basically at the very least, this is going to trade off white's weaker squared bishop for black's stronger squared bishop. This bishop on h6 versus this bishop on h8. Those two should trade off against each other, and I think with that in mind, this is going to end up being I think basically this is going to be somewhat premature for white. Yeah, no, good game, Limestone. Thank you very much for sending it. But yeah, I think that this bishop h6 is probably a little bit early. It's a good idea, but I think that with bishop h6, bishop takes h6, queen to b6, black's going to have kind of an early press on this b3 or on this b2 pawn. Interestingly, queen to c1 I didn't think would be the strongest move here, but queen to c1 is actually what the engine is proposing. On queen, I was thinking b3 was probably a better way to maintain the full pawn structure, but queen to c1 actually is smart for a number of reasons. Basically queen to c1 puts a defensive play on b2. And that actually makes sense because, there are only two moves that I see, at least, that defend the pawn on b2. One is b3 and one is queen to c1. So of those two, queen to c1 actually fixes the queen's positioning. There's many situations in chess where, I think that these are really, I'm hoping that it's helpful, but definitely, everyone's tactics get, more pressed in speed games. I mean, I play enough bullet now that I can just tell you, everyone makes grandmasters at the right time control will make piece-losing mistakes very frequently. Everybody makes big tactical mistakes. So what I'm saying here is, I think the queen to c1 is a good move. I like this as an idea. It actually, it's one of the two moves that prevents white from losing material, and it ends up being, and basically it ends up defending this b2 pawn, but it brings the queen back into the game. There's a pretty frequent situation where, white can potentially play a move like queen to g7, and then end up in a situation where they are getting attacked with the full force, on their queen side, for example. And they won't be able to bring their own queen in to become an active piece in the game. So it will create a developmental issue. Here, queen to c1 actually brings this queen back into a position where it can be, reallocated to other places in this game. Knight to c3 can happen, e3 can happen, bishop to d3. But white's going to end up in a situation basically where, he's going to have a queen in a relatively normal place, continue to have control over this long diagonal, and be able to develop his pieces in a normal way. So overall, queen to c1 actually made sense for reasons that I didn't think of necessarily, but the engine finds, which is that it brings the queen back into the game from being dislocated. After this bishop was exchanged, this f8 for this h6 bishop, that was probably a slightly good trade for white, but the action on the king side for the queen is relatively over. Like, there's not much of an opportunity for the queen to do things like take h7 or, basically win any more material on the king side. So bringing the queen back into where the action in the game is happening actually makes a lot of sense. Knight to d7, I'm just, as black, I'm just trying to develop here. e3, knight to e4. Knight to e4, I understand you're not supposed to move the same piece twice in the same opening. I'm looking at the engine now, and castles was better than knight to e4. I was thinking that there might be good developmental ideas along the lines of knight to e4, d knight to f6, and then castles. So I was thinking the combination of those would be good for black, but castling is a more straightforwardly developing move, and it's what the engine considers to be better. So yeah, knight to e4, knight to d2, knight to f6. So I was continuing this plan where I was trying to get a knight posted on e4. But at each of these points, definitely at the earlier point, the engine is advocating castling first. c4, knight takes d2 is given as best here. I'm not a big fan of knight takes d2. Knight takes d2 kind of, it basically uses a move of black's to simplify. So you're basically spending a knight that has been moved 3 times and trading it for a knight that has been moved 1 time. So if that's playable, then that means that black has to have kind of equalized in tempo-wise on other places on the board. So I'm thinking knight takes d2, knight takes d2, c5 is given as next, and yeah, I understand that line, but that's not what I played. I played something that I thought was more straightforward, which was basically sorry, excuse me, which was basically just bishop to f5, developing another piece. I figured that the knight's off d7, so play bishop f5, and this develops a piece. But this was imprecise for black. Knight takes, and the position's about equal. I mean, nothing particularly good happening for black here. White will probably play moves like bishop to e2, bishop to d3, castles, and black's going to try to maintain this knight on e4. But black's not better here. So b3, I think, is a little bit quiet. I think the issue with b3 is that it doesn't really do much to challenge black here. So I think that maybe the move that I'm looking at is knight to d2. This knight is posted on e4. It controls squares on white's position, like g3, f2, d2, and c3. If white plays to d2, that challenges the posting of this knight. The knight's either going to have to move or black's going to have to trade the knight. So I think that this might be a better play for white here. Just challenge this posted knight, I was thinking. b3, it does expand the mobility of the queen. That a3 could be something that's valuable to the queen in a little bit. But I think that white's basically I think instead moves like a4 might be good. But knight to d2, challenging the best piece on black's board. I think that's the move. But interesting situation. Honestly, I'm just sort of trying to come up with basically, I didn't see knight to d2, but it seems to be the preferred thing from the engine. Right. Yeah, that makes sense. There's definitely truth to that, Limestone. So that makes a lot of sense to me. Right. Yeah. I mean that's true. There's nothing to say there except that it's true. So the thing is whether that's a valuable enough problem to allocate a move to. That's my question there. But you're right. I mean, that does fix a problem. it just might not be the biggest problem that but yeah, no, I mean, it makes sense. So you know, in terms of your thought process, I really think that you're thinking about the game the right way. I mean, you know, b3 is a purposeful move, and that makes a lot of sense. I completely understand why you would play that. I understand the logic. Yeah, you as long as you know the biggest priority is really to play purposeful moves in a non-tactical position, like in a position, you know, basically a less tactically complicated. Yeah, no. I mean, I think it makes a lot of sense. You know, sometimes people just play moves, you know, myself included, just play moves sometimes because they look good. But you had a reasoning behind the move. It's just about I think the next step is just sort of coming up with you know, comparing that reasoning to you know, or like valuing the reasoning behind the move of b3 versus other things that are going on the board. And I understand that's a subjective assessment, but the top priority is that you played something purposeful, and I think that's definitely good thinking. So yeah, you know, the engine's proposing knight to d2, challenging black's best piece. b3 makes sense. You know, I get that. I mean, you know, basically, if you play b3, you can you know, involve your queen in the game, maybe through c3 or a3, but get your queen involved in a more complicated position. The engine's pushing for knight to d2. I think that makes sense. You know, I think black's knight here is the most powerful piece on the board at the moment. So knight to d2 does make sense in terms of challenging that. A3 is getting proposed by the engine, which is kind of interesting. I wouldn't think to do that, but A3 and then B4 is going to be a queenside expansion. So that's interesting. But yeah, B3 is a purposeful move. So as long as, you know, given that the move is purposeful, the only thing to do from there is basically say, you know, is the purpose behind this move, that something that I thought consciously about, is that, how does that compare to the purpose of knight to d2, trying to trade off, you know, this average knight for this strong knight. But as long as the move was done for a reason, you've achieved kind of the lowest level goal. But that said, that lowest level goal is often not met, especially in speed chess games. So I think that makes sense. I think there's, you know, the logic behind that I like. You know, I do the same thing on the next move. I play e6. I mean, e6 doesn't really help. In fact, e6, when I play e6, I think that's a bad move by me. You know, this e6 move does defend d5, but it really causes mobility problems for this light squared bishop. That doesn't particularly make sense for black. So I'm thinking g5, bishop g6. That could be good. But yeah, this e6 move is worse for black. That shouldn't have been the play. Black still has developing moves to do, among other things. You know, black should probably castle kingside. Black should probably, you know, an attack that might be effective for black is playing a5 and a4. But yeah, e6 I think is not so great. That said, I think you should leave the tension on this board. I think, you know, basically because this e6 creates such a problem for this bishop, I think your best opportunity might be h3 followed by g4, trying to trap this bishop in and expanding a bit on the king side. There's not really too many direct kingside threats. The queen is pretty far dislocated from the king side at this moment. So I think h3 g4, or actually let's take it from white's perspective. I think h3 g4 might be a better strategy for white, capitalizing on this bishop being weak. So I think pawn takes d5. I don't think pawn takes d5 is it does have the advantage of making your bishop a little bit more mobile. But in general, I don't know how much benefit there is to you in relieving the tension here. I think after pawn takes d5, e takes d5 fixes what was a mobility problem. So I'm proposing h3 g4 as being the next move for white here. The next move, the strategy for white. c takes, bishop d3, castles, bishop takes. And here, I would recommend castling. Or no, I like queen d1. I understand not wanting to castle into doubled pawns, but I think that castling here, yeah. All right, so you did it right. Yeah, this is exactly what no, this is exactly right for white. Queen to d1, I think, is good. A5 is not a great play by me. That's not a particularly effective way to go about this. And then castles, and white's development is pretty much complete. And yeah, it's about equals. F5, I make a big tactical error. Knight to e5 is permanently posted here. So yeah, so basically with f5, I actually make a big positional, basically a bad positional move here. This was not a good idea for me. And as a result, the move for white is knight to e5, and white's looking great. White's up by about 2 pawns, 2.5 pawns. F5 or f4 seems to be one of my better chances. The f5 pawn's not doing anything, so I'm going to try to shift play to the king side. And then f3, bishop f5, rook to c1, rook takes, and then there's a tactic that wins the queen. So yeah, this is really interesting. I was much worse, right? You had a good position here. The knight is extremely strong on e5. This bishop is fine on e4, but this knight is going to be impossible to remove. There's literally no pieces on the board that can remove this knight, right? Black will probably have, if black wants to get rid of this white knight, he's going to have to sacrifice a full exchange. So yeah, that's what that's about. And I don't know. I mean, I guess what I would say about it is black is worse. Black is just worse. This knight is posted on exactly the square that you want the knight posted on. And then it just comes down to a tactical, basically a speed-related tactical miscalculation. But definitely worth noting, you're up 2 pawns here. This knight on e4 is very powerful. Knight on e5 is very powerful. Interesting. F3, bishop f5, rook to c1, and yeah, rook to d2, and that's a tactic. So in looking at this game, I thought you played well. I mean, there's not really much of, I thought from the opening perspective, everything sort of made sense. I thought queen to d2 was probably a little bit premature, but this is an understandable idea. Basically, trading off black's good squared bishop for your bad squared bishop makes sense to me. Queen to c1, e3, knight to d2, and yeah, I'm just sort of liking white's general position here. It's equals, and then with the f5 error, knight posted on e5, white's up, positionally a couple pawns. So at the end of the day, I thought your positional play was great in this game. I thought queen to d2, if I was going to make one suggestion, I would say that queen to d2 is probably a little bit, it's too early for this. I think you might want to get more complete development before you start committing your pieces over there. Yeah, no, totally. So that knight got posted there on e5, and yeah. Knight to d2. But yeah, posting the knight on e5, white's in good shape. And then that discovery. Yeah, so at the end of the day, I thought your positional play was good. I think it just came down to tactics, as blitz games often do. And yeah, so I do think it's a priority. I mean, I think, I don't dislike the idea, but I would wait a few more moves. I'd probably throw in, like, c4, knight c3, bishop g3 maybe. It's understandable that you want to trade off that bishop on g7. If you want to start a kingside attack, sometimes it can be good for that, like h4, h5, and then bishop takes g7. But I don't think, yeah, I don't think it's worth making it such a high priority that it goes in before your development. I think you're, basically e3, bishop to d3, knight to d2, and white's just solid here. It's better to get your pieces developed than it is to play, bishop to g7 here. So queen to d2 here. So that's my first suggestion. I think this was done too early. Bishop to h6 is frequently playable, but usually in the context of a broader attack. I would complete white's development first. I don't think it's that important to get that dark squared bishop off the board. Yeah, so I'd play a little bit quieter here. Also, I'm wondering just sort of what happens with knight to e4. Knight to e4, I guess queen to c1, and that's fine. So yeah, but I think this general idea is a little bit too early. That said, queen to c1 was a great play to bring the queen back into the game. And then black was kind of underwhelming from most of this. And then f5 leads you to get this knight e5. You saw the outpost, you took the outpost. At this point I'm down, and the goal is basically for me to create as much counterplay as I can to try to get back the game. And luckily enough, this tactic is there. So at the end of the day, I would say the takeaways from this are queen to d2 first. I think that's too early to play that. I think you want to make a bigger effort to complete your development as white. Bishop h6, removing bishop on g7 can definitely be a tactic that you play later. But this early in the game, I think that queen to d2 is early. Instead just complete development. And then the second thing is, really just tactics are extremely important. Tactical study, I think, is the way to go. With good tactics, with enough tactical study, I don't know which tactics trainer you use, but with either chess.com's Puzzle Rush or Puzzle Battle, or Chess Tempo's free option, or Lichess's free options, which I'm not super familiar with, whatever tactics trainer it is, I strongly recommend putting like 1 or 2 hours a day in for like a month. It'll really help. Chess is a continuous process of improvement, so at the end of that month you'll still have a long way. You'll have an infinitely long way to go. But at the same time, you'll really improve. Puzzle Battle's great. I strongly recommend Puzzle Battle. I think when push comes to shove, that's the quickest way that you will be able to improve. So that's why I'm recommending it. That's that. I think Puzzle Battle is a good thing, I think. Keep it up. Keep up the good work. Very interesting game. Good positional vision on knight to e5, and we played the same game. You were up a good number of pawns positionally, and then it came down to the tactics, which it often does in Blitz, to be fair. But you had a good position. You played the opening well. I would slow down on queen to d2, but overall positionally, that all made sense. Queen to c1 was also a great move. I wouldn't have seen it. Thanks for the game, Limestone. Hope that was helpful, and thank you very much for participating in that. Very curious about seeing if we could do this as or if people like this as kind of a lesson idea, but just an idea for now. Cool. And then we have the other game against D. Wilkins. All right. Cool. All right, so against Dan Wilkins, I get white, and he plays the Caro-Kann. So let's take it from his perspective and watch the Caro-Kann. So I don't usually play the advance. Advanced Caro-Kann, it's not bad, but advanced French, advanced Caro-Kann, they're kind of not. I don't know. I think the main lines are objectively a little bit better. Here, e5 is the second most popular response to the Caro-Kann. But I don't usually play it. Not sure what possessed me to play it in this game, but I did. So, okay, so we're playing out of the Caro-Kann advance as opposed to the mainline knight to c3. Just so everyone knows, what the mainline Caro-Kann actually has a very fixed line. There's 10 moves that are memorizable. Interesting. Interesting. Yeah. I'm not sure if this is theory that you guys are familiar with, but it's theory that's worth memorizing. It plays into a lot of games, and the main line in the Caro-Kann is actually very well defined to the 10th move. So in the Caro-Kann, knight to c3, pawn takes e4, knight takes e4, bishop f5, knight to g3, bishop to g6, h4, h6, knight to d7, or sorry, knight to f3, knight to d7, h5, bishop h7, bishop d3, bishop takes d3, queen takes d3. It's really that. I mean, there's so few games where I'm like, you should probably memorize this, but the mainline Caro-Kann is like a memorizable 10 moves of opening theory that I recommend. I think this is worthwhile to learn. It's not super complicated to learn, but those 10 moves, and you'll know you did it right because you take the bishop on d3 on move 10. There really is like a fixed line there. So I don't know if that's helpful, but memorizing those 10 moves, it's one of the few opening situations where I actually think it's worthwhile to learn the opening, pretty much by memorization. I instead play e5 this game. This is the Caro-Kann advance. Bishop f5's main line, knight f3, e6, and then I play bishop to d3. Main line here is bishop to e2. This is much quieter. On knight to d7, castles, knight e7, knight d2. Basically, white's looking, white's looking fine here, I think. So yeah, bishop to e2 is the main line for white. I play bishop to d3. This actually has I'm just looking at this. This is a pretty bad win ratio for white. I probably shouldn't be playing this. In terms of eval, it's not much worse. Bishop to e2 is the book move, but looking at this breakdown, that's pretty bad. 11% win percentage for white, that looks pretty ugly. Anyways, bishop to d3 is what I played. Bishop takes, queen takes. Interesting. Yeah, queen to d3, c5, c3, knight to c6, castles. Basically, white's doing fine here, I think. h6 looks fine for white. Pawn takes, pawn takes. And yeah. So here, this is kind of interesting. Basically, this sort of turns into a French-type structure. One of the key parts of the French so basically one of the things that's pretty common in the Caro-Kann is that the position turns from a Caro-Kann game into a French game. That's not too uncommon. C3 basically defends d4, and white's looking fine. Yeah, I'm doing the three game reviews starting in about 10-15 minutes or so. But yeah, well, hey, welcome guys. Yeah, so I was doing the 3 games that were sent in. I tried something out tonight. I tried doing a simul, and then I'm doing a lesson based off of the game analysis from the simul. Just trying a new thing out. We'll see if it's helpful. But I thought this might be a good idea for a lesson, or a good way to do one. So here, knight to c6. This is all really pretty straightforward, to be honest. We're still in opening theory, by the way. This is there's 8 games out of this situation. Castles, c takes d4, c takes d4, knight e7, knight c3. And here, I think basically white's doing fine. Knight f5, bishop to e3 probably, but no problems. Maybe b3. It's up to you. But white's looking solid. White's looking solid, but so is black. I mean, it's basically a game now. We've exited opening theory. There's only 4 games left. I play something that's probably not correct. I play bishop to g5. This seems to be about 3/10 of a pawn, 4/10 of a pawn worse than the best option. Knight e2 is the best option. Opening book says bishop to e3 is the most common. Bishop to e3 or knight e2 is better than bishop to g5. Bishop to g5 is just the wrong diagonal for the bishop. I shouldn't be playing it there. I should be playing bishop to e3 and solidifying this d4 square. With bishop to g5, I think that you get some pretty good play immediately with queen to b6. This d4 pawn, I'm not sure, should have gotten lost by white. But yeah, this bishop g5 by me I don't think is particularly good. You play queen b6, which is a very intuitive option. Queen b6 makes sense to me. And then with b3 I hang the pawn. So knight takes. So basically, let's just focus on this. Yeah, no, it's a tactical mistake. But see, the thing about it, DW, is look how good your position. You know, it's just we all make mistakes. Is the main point. But here, black is black's up by 2.5 pawns. This is not the position that white wants to be in here. B3 basically hangs the knight. It just has to be this one. With this one taking, white's in bad shape. I mean, knight takes d4, queen takes d4. Yeah, I mean, that's right. But I mean, you know, you have a good position here. Ideally, you know, you've done way more than equalize. Black is legitimately winning with this d4 pawn missing. So yeah, so that was the difference. You know, this knight takes d4 allows kind of the quick tactic. Knight take. Well, it's interesting. The computer does it a little bit differently, but knight d4, knight takes d4, and then I saw knight a4. Bishop to e3 also looks pretty interesting. So that's a tactical difference, right? It's interesting. This knight basically was So this knight was the one to take with the f knight. After this happened, I think white was in pretty good shape, just sort of up a piece. I don't want to spend too much time on that. But looking at this, the opening was played correctly. Bishop d3 basically is not the correct line. Bishop to d3 is a side line that was surprisingly good in terms of eval. So I guess maybe I shouldn't be too upset about it. But I was trying to play main lines here, and bishop to e2 is a main line. So bishop to e2, knight d7, castles, knight e7, knight d2, and this is a basically short variation of the Caro-Kann, just in case we're interested. Bishop d3 was premature for me. After pawn takes, we're back in opening theory. Theory's been played correctly. Knight g7, knight c3, knight f5, and here basically white badly needs to defend the d4 pawn. I don't. I play b3, and then with knight f takes, you're better by 2 pawns. So I don't know. Good positional play by you. And then as happens in many blitz games, I was lucky enough to get a tactic. But interesting game. I basically up until this move, where the correct response is actually knight takes d5, which I wouldn't have seen. There's no way I would have seen knight takes d5 here. But rook a d1 is what I was looking at. Rook a d1, and then probably this pawn is too displacing to the queen to take. But if you really want the material edge, you can get it. So yeah, overall, I don't know. I mean, the opening was played correctly. You did everything right. We were within opening theory, until basically we were in opening theory well past d4. I'm the one who breaks opening theory, by the way. I'm the one who plays the incorrect move. The correct move here was bishop to e3 or knight to e2. Bishop to g5 places the bishop on the wrong diagonal. It also shifts the eval about 3/10 of a pawn against me. Not the right move. Queen to b6. Queen to b6, knight takes d5 provides a tactic that I definitely wouldn't have seen. Rook a d1 is what I was looking at. Rook a d1 is fine, about equal. Knight takes d5 is a better move for white. But b3 is definitely not the right move for white. And after fnx, you're up 2 pawns. So interesting game. We all make tactical oversights, myself very much included, because I got in the middle game positions where I was losing by like 2 pawns against both of you guys. Tactical problems are nothing to be concerned about. There's something that you can fix. There's something that everyone does, pretty much continuously. So yeah, the game is about tactics though. So at the same time that, everyone makes tactical errors, the quickest way to improve is by, really focusing on tactical study. With focus on tactical study, spending a lot of time on it, and using a tactics trainer, I really do think that you have the opportunity to become, very strong. Basically, with very little beyond that. You can pretty much get out of class level with very focused tactical study. It will take you much further than you think. So that's where both of those games were decided. Walkaway tactics for both of them. Against Limestone, there's the Queen D2 positional game, but here we were just in theory until a tactical mistake was made, and then the game sort of concluded. But anyways, very good games from both of you guys. Thank you guys for being willing to try doing that. I hope that was fun. It was interesting for me at least to try something new. Yeah, thanks very much for that. Thanks for doing that. Cool. So that was an idea for a lesson. Interesting, hopefully. I learned a little bit more about that theory, so good stuff. Thanks for participating. All right, on to the viewer games. Here's Drayson's game. D4, knight f6, e6, knight c3, bishop to b4. We're in the Nimzo Indian defense. So in the Nimzo Indian defense, bishop to g5 is definitely a move. It's not the most common. Most common here is, bishop to b4, bishop to g5. Bishop to g5 is not the most common move here, is what I meant to say. Bishop to g5, and then black's main option here is h6. The h6 line goes h6, bishop h4, c5, d5, d6, e3, but you're basically into a well-examined kind of Leningrad game. They're calling it the Benoni Defense, not associated with the Benoni Gambit, not associated with the mainline Benoni. What was I thinking? I was thinking the Benko Gambit, but not associated with the mainline Benoni. This is the Benoni. Basically, turns into Benoni after d5, e3, d6, e3. And yeah, so far we're kind of in mainline theory here, but the main line was h6, bishop h4, c5. That's mainline in this Nimzo Indian. Okay, castles, e4, h6, queen takes, e5, queen e7, bishop takes, pawn takes c3, and yeah, I think an undermining move here is d6 potentially. D5 I'm sure is also fine. But the engine is suggesting d6 or b6. D5 makes sense. I'm not down on d5. The one thing about d5 is that it's not disruptive to this pawn structure. With d5, this pawn, basically this doubled pawn can trade off. This pawn can trade off, and white's going to get this situation where he's got, a strong pawn structure in the center. So that's probably the reasoning behind not playing d5 there. In general, I like it. I like the way that it challenges for the center, but d6 is more damaging to white's pawn structure. d6, pawn takes d6, and then either knight takes d6 or pawn takes d6, and things are pretty much fine. Bishop to c2, pawn takes c5, pawn takes, queen to b4, queen takes. I like black's situation, to be honest. Yeah. Alright, and then went to a draw. Interesting. I actually think we've looked at this game before, so I'm going to skip on to the next one. But yeah, thank you very much for sending the game, Drayson. Watch this morning's stream if you want to rewatch that. But yeah, it's an interesting game. Shows mainline in the Nimzo Indian. Here's Kathleen's game. Let's take a look at Kathleen's game. Kathleen is a member of the Chess Study Group Discord, and here is her game. E4, C5, knight F3, D6, D4. Okay, mainline Sicilian, cool. Open Sicilian, good. Knight F6, knight C3, A6. Yeah, this is the Najdorf variation of the Sicilian. Very well examined lines. Bishop to G5 is the primary move. Bishop to E3 can also be played. E6 is fine. Queen to D2, bishop E7, and then F3, queen to C7. And yeah, I think here, it's sort of, I assume it's still good for white. No big mistakes for either. In this game, white's going to end up with a strong attack on the king side, probably H4, G4. And black's going to be pushing his pawns. He's going to start a minority attack with B5, B4 probably. And I think that black will be pretty strong after this. Castles, knight D7, king B1. Overall, yeah, I mean, both sides are kind of constructing their attack. This I think is a very fundamentally accurate game. G4 with H4 and threat on the king side coming, and queen side is playing well and expanding for black. So both sides are playing this in a thematically correct way, which I have to give credit for. That's it's not many people know that, or I mean, some people do, but it's not a universally known themes. Okay, there's a tactic here, B4, B4, and then so F3 is an error because on B4, knight goes to E2, and then knight takes E4. So overall, I think that this ends up being an error for white, falling to B4. Straightforward moves like, probably H5 here could be good. You could proactively bring the knight to the king side here too, knight E2, knight to G3, and pressure on the king side. But yeah, F4 runs into the B4 tactic, so F4 is not playable. White misses, or black misses that, so you're able to reinforce the pawn with the G bishop. And here you're still in the same situation. This B4 is still playable on the next move for black. So A3 is getting suggested by the engine. E5 is interesting. I think there are some tactical issues with this one too, unfortunately. I think here probably they're saying B4 is the best, but let's take a look at D takes E5, which is the most intuitive and would probably be played in this game. D5, bishop takes B7, rook takes D4. And if pawn takes E5, then B4, and this knight is totally stuck. That's interesting. Bishop takes B7, and then B takes C3. Gets into a very tactical situation, very complicated position, yeah. So yeah, so this game becomes highly tactical. I wouldn't be too worried about things. I would just sort of roll with this. White gets a great position. White, breaks through black's defenses and gets a queen up. It's a win for white. But the really important pieces of this game, and let's take a look at them. I think white plays correctly. These are all book moves and are fine. And then there are a few tactical errors. F4 leaves E4 hanging. This loses to B4. And then E5, pawn takes E5, queen to C5, knight to C6. I think basically rook takes, queen to C7, knight takes C7, and white wins. So yeah, so it got tactically complicated. Black missed a key opportunity with B4, hanging E4 so F4 and then B4, and then the knight has to move, and then knight takes E4, and the knight's going to be probably posted on this this E4 square. But then black misplays tactically, and you're way ahead. So overall, I think, other than that premature f4 move, I don't think there's really any errors in this game. I'm shocked that that's the eval. I don't understand why that is, but yeah, now white's just better. Yeah, so good game, Kathleen. Well played. Yeah, I don't have much to offer you. Basically, I think this was all played solidly. I think f3 is a completely intuitive move here, and then yeah, f4 is a tactical error, but your general idea is great. Thematically, I think this was played perfectly. I think h4, h5, f5 potentially. All these threats on the king side are very good. Yeah. Now white, knight takes c7, queen takes a8, and white's fine. Nicely done. Good job by white. Yeah. Yeah, good playing, Kathleen. Thanks very much for sending the game. Yeah, don't have much to offer you. Really, that f4 move was a mistake, but other than that, I guess we could look a little bit at more of these tactics, but I don't think there were any errors by white, really. E5. Oh, sorry, there was one. So yeah, so f4 and then b4, and then bishop b7, and then e5. And the issue with e5 is that b4 can be played, and then b4, b4 displaces this knight. So this knight has nowhere to go. So basically e5, b4, and then this square's taken, this square's taken. The only square that's not taken for that knight is knight to e2, which hangs this bishop on g2. So two tactics related to b4 in this game were dangerous against white. And yeah, I think that's it. In terms of how this game played out, yeah, just be careful with those b4 tactics. b4, can push that knight, and that knight's a necessary resource for e4 in a lot of cases. That's my takeaway from that game. Otherwise, excellently played. I don't think there's a whole lot to improve on. But just be more conscious of those b4 threats and how they might disrupt defense of the knight on e4. But overall, great game. Thanks very much for sending it. And on to the next one. All right, this is Limestone's game. Thank you very much for sending it, Limestone, and yeah, it looks like thank you very much for being here for the analysis. Limestone's game. All right, Limestone is playing black here. Let's take it from black's perspective, and yeah, looks like an Italian game, and I just want to play through really quick. Okay, Traxler, awesome. Cool. So, Traxler game. Traxler games are always interesting. I feel like we should take a look at the Aphelion line in the Traxler, just since we're interested in making sure that line sees a lot of views. But yeah, Aphelion's got his own line in the Traxler. Just so we know, Aphelion's line is this. It is here. E4, E5, knight F3, knight C6, bishop C4, knight F6. Knight plays to G5, bishop C5, so entering Traxler theory. Knight takes, bishop takes, king F1, queen E7, knight takes H8, D5, pawn takes, knight to D4. and d3, and then c3. And basically at the end of this, in this Aphelion line, Aphelion is up by 3 points as white. This is big. Should be a win for white. Going through it again, the knight to g5 is the invitation to play the Traxler, and then the Traxler is established with bishop to c5. Knight takes f7, bishop takes, king f1 is better than king takes f2. Queen e7, knight takes h8, and white's doing fine here. d6, queen d6, c3. White's in good shape. White's up by 4 pawns or so, and yeah, should be a win. I guess better here was no, of course, no, send it. No, of course, Limestone. No, I'm very happy to look at it. The Traxler is always interesting. It's always interesting, and thank you very much for sending it. So if I just close, I guess I just closed it. But yeah, I'm always happy to look at a line in the Traxler. That's you know, it gives us a second to showcase Aphelion's line, and then it has a lot of exciting attacks. So all right. So taken from Limestone's perspective, e4, e5, starting off as the Petrov's. It's called the Urasov Gambit, but then it becomes the Italian game. Then it becomes the Traxler. I think that maybe king e7. I guess king e7 is better than king e8, king f8. Yeah, king e7. Queen e8, knight to c3, h6, knight f3, bishop takes h3. And yeah, you know, basically at this point, I think that white's already in a lot of trouble. I have to think black's winning by a pawn. Black's best defense here is, how good is the Petrov? Petrov is playable at the top level. You know, it depends on how comfortable you are playing it. It will be the biggest determinant of your results. But yeah, it is. It's good. It's playable at the highest level, and feel free to, you know, there are Grandmaster games that you can draw from. So yeah, I think it's fine. I don't think you should do things like the Stafford Gambit. I don't think you should do like crazy gambits or things that don't positionally make sense. But yeah, Stafford Gambit, and you're fine. Avoid the Stafford Gambit, and you're fine. Getting a little late here. But yeah, so I mean, sure. It's not a bad opening, Limestone. If you want to switch things up, you can always play the you can always play the Italian game, which will be the Rui Lopez. But there are good things to be said for the Petrov's opening, because in the Petrov's opening you basically do get to choose the opening as black, at least to the degree that you're choosing between the Italian game and the real Petrov's. So makes sense. So this is interesting. I mean, the Traxler is very interesting. Just so we look at it, there's a difference of about 2.1 pawns between the Traxler and the d5 knight to a5 alternative. Main line here is pawn takes knight a5. I don't know if that's, you know, better. Objectively, it's better. I don't know, but you might have good winning chances out of the Traxler too. So up to you. With bishop e7, king e7, white is fine until knight c3. On queen g6, h6, knight f3, bishop takes. You know, the best defense for white, it's not king to h2. So let's take a look at the engine line here. There's actually still one master game in here, which is surprising to me. In this master game, it went like this: queen f3, queen takes f3, knight takes, bishop g4, and basically the queen played to g3 and then traded off on f3. Knight to h4, king d7, knight to g6, rook fe8. And here, you know, black is, I don't know, up by 0.3 or so. It's a little better for black. But this is basically white's best defense here. Yeah, so knight h4 was the defensive move. I'm also wondering about knight e1, what would have happened in knight e1. But knight e1, bishop to g4, and then this is a pretty crazy line. So bishop to g4, knight to f3. This was I'm not sure. This is Limestone's game. I don't have the time controls on it, so I don't know. Knight to d4, knight takes d4, bishop takes d4, I guess. But yeah, basically black's looking fine. But yeah, so knight h4 was a better defense. Queen to g3, queen to f3, queen takes h4, I guess is a little bit better. At least this leaves white with a fractured pawn structure on the king side. The other way, the knight can just take, and the pawns don't get doubled. They just end up fine. So overall, interesting game. Better defense for white here would have been knight to h4 after bishop to h3. So, anyways, interesting situation. Queen takes g2 is better, and knight to h4 was a better defensive resource for white. Anyways, interesting situation. We can take a look at the next one. But yeah, thank you for sending it in, Limestone. Really appreciate you being here and sending in the game. Always happy to see more of the Traxler. Traxler is a fun opening. Yeah, always cool when you play it and you get the quick win. It's fun stuff. So here's a big game. This was sent by Coda Nova. Okay. So knight c3, d5. So this is the Van Geet opening, is what this is called, one knight c3. d5 is the main response. And then the main response for white is e4, then d4. That's the main line. If anyone ever wants to see the main line for the Van Geet opening, it's d4, knight e2, and then usually e5, knight g3, I think knight to c6 probably. Or no, sorry, bishop to e6, knight to f3. It's not an important opening to have memorized. This is pretty, I don't know, I guess I would say fairly junky stuff. They call it the Scandinavian closed. That's kind of interesting. But that's called the Van Geet opening if white plays one knight c3. d5, knight e4, knight f6, e takes, c3 is the book move. White plays e5 here. By the way, white appears to have a rating of 2300. I'm sort of curious about that. But e4, d takes e3, queen to e2. And yeah, black's up by about 2 pawns. But this position goes very well for black. Let's see where the misstep was. I'm sort of curious to see where things sort of took a turn. White's playing in kind of a weird way. One knight c3 is not great for white, so it's kind of silly to play it. But black's better basically from this point. Queen to e2 is also an unusual move. And then the full sacrifice of d2 is unnecessary and not good for white. So white's playing a lot of strange moves in this opening. Rook to a2 is an interesting tactic. They're calling rook to a2 a blunder. I don't really think it is. I think drawing that queen away from the bishop on e3, that's fine. Rook takes, bishop to e2. But yeah, black's kind of squandered this. Up until this point, black's up by about 7 points. So giving these pieces away for no reason seems unreasonable. So yeah, I think that, apart from the fact that there are some tactical inaccuracies here, what I really think is worth focusing on is the kind of I guess I would say errors in this game, basically. Uh, this, interesting. All right. Yeah, so black basically ends up recovering, but I think I would focus more on kind of the conceptual error that comes like midway through this game. Black is up by a lot. Black is up by 7 points, right? Um, at this point, in terms of material, uh, you know, actually no. Let's take a look. So materially speaking, right? This is black is technically an exchange down. He's it's an exchange to 2 pawns. But black's interesting. For some reason I thought black was actually a head material here. He's not. Um, but white's king safety is terrible, and black is under, or basically white's under a serious attack. So things like queen to e3 are really dangerous for white. On queen to e3 specifically, you're threatening to win this knight on g1, and basically do. The only place that this knight can go is f3, and you can just play rook takes f3. So this wins the knight on g1. Queen to e3 here is better. So yeah, this threat is better for black. On bishop takes f4, white has this tactical strike. Queen takes d7 is slightly better for black. You don't hang the queen or anything, or you're not giving up back rank or anything. Yeah, basically black is winning, about to win. So yeah, missteps here. It's a very tactically complicated position. Black never actually secures the advantage. Here, basically, black is up by a full pawn, but he loses an exchange. Basically, loses an exchange at some point. This rook to a2 is considered to be a blunder. This gives back an exchange. I'm not sure this was the right way to do this. I think there's a lot of different ways. So I think knight e7, knight to f5 could be good. That puts pressure on this bishop on e3. But rook a2, does create a great attack, but it's kind of difficult to execute. You're giving up an exchange here. So far you're up. You have a great position. You're up a full pawn, and you basically give away an exchange. So you probably should have a pretty solid tactical follow-up to this. I mean, you do. Your position is so much better than white's here that your tactical follow-up is fine. But the issue, I guess I would say, is that you don't you don't have much. You don't really have much there after white neutralizes. This is really tactical. I mean, the engine's going to be able to do this way better than I am, to be honest. But here, bishop takes f4, rook takes, knight to e5, and white's equalized. In terms of material, black is down a full rook here. G6 is kind of a crazy move. Surprised that that's it. But yeah, knight f3 and white's up. So yeah, I think that this was overly pressed. I think that basically you go for kind of this all-out attack in a situation that doesn't really warrant it. Your situation is fine. Material here is fine. You're up a pawn. You have great pressure on this bishop on e3. So I think that rook a2 is an error, and I think that just I think it largely stems from that error. There's still tactical resources that are available. We can play through like h6. It's going to become a super complicated tactical position. But yeah, overall here, black's just going to be, basically black's better from this point. So it was a mistake for white to give back the rook, but I think it was a mistake to give up that exchange. I think you can just. I think that the whole fundamentals of this attack were kind of ill-conceived. Like, you're up 7 here. The route that I would go with here is like knight to e7, knight to f5, and then and threats on e3. You're fine as black. Don't overpress this. Rook to a2, queen takes a2, rook takes e3, and black's just basically giving up. Black has a strong attack, so he still has all the positional advantages that he did previously. He's just, he was up 7 and now he's up 3, and that loss of 4 reflects a direct loss of material. I don't think that was a good plan. I just think that you should chill, basically chill here. Pawn takes, knight to e7, knight to f5, and black's just gonna be cool. No big issues in this line. So yeah, I think the attack needs to be calmer. You don't need to go all out on this attack, which is still, pretty speculative at this point. I mean, it's very complicated, so, I assume you didn't calculate it out fully. I certainly wouldn't have. It's a very complicated position. But my main point here is just to relax and play a more, a more passive opening. Things like knight e7, things like knight f5, things like, potentially bishop to c6. This is sort of what you want to do here. Don't give up the full rook, and then you lose even another piece, and then don't sacrifice an additional piece. Now you're a full rook down, and with no mate really apparent here. At the end of the day, you won the game. That's great. It was a solid game, but I think that you had a great position and a 1-pawn lead, and I think that going about that in a more conservative way was the way to do it. You were already up a pawn. I mean, it's not as if you were down and you needed an attack desperately here. You didn't. Basically here, as a large speculative attack up material and position, I think was not the way to go. So anyways, interesting game. This theory, Van Geet theory, if there is any, I don't really know it beyond the main line. Knight takes, pawn takes, e5, knight f3, knight g5. And basically, hey, welcome, Pravilo. Thanks for joining the stream. But basically here, this is, black's just fine here. There's no real thing to worry about. Anyways, it's just the Van Geet opening is not really that great for white. Black equalizes or does well out of it in pretty much every situation. Cool, yeah, awesome, Pravilo. I'm glad the schedule works for you. So yeah, here you're just sort of cementing a lead. I think you continue to expand your lead. This whole battery, rook to e8 to king on e1, this is going to be bad for black. And rook to a2 is an error. I don't think you should have played that. I'm sort of wondering if you wanted to try a sacrifice. I'm sort of curious about this one. Knight takes b4, pawn takes b4. I mean, this is still worse than knight e7 or something that doesn't sacrifice at all. But rook to a3, and you put a lot of pressure on this bishop on e3. This was a fine way to go too. But my main question is, fundamentally speaking, so tactically speaking, I think knight takes is a little bit better than rook to a2. But fundamentally speaking, and objectively, according to the engine analysis, I don't think there was really much reason to continue to press so hard on this. I think you're basically in a situation where you can just enjoy this, the strength of your position. E8 facing king e1 is really hard for white to undo, or undo quickly. You're up 7 points. This is a very good position for black. So in this case, I would just say just chill. Rook a2 is not it's too committal to play and have it not be the best move. It's too speculative. knight e7, and you know that you have a good position. Like, you know that this rook is facing e8 or e1, and that's going to be likely to win you material. So yeah, I would say, just don't go crazy if you don't need to. This overall situation, rook a2, queen takes a2. It's a speculative attack in a situation where you were already up. When you're already up, you're in a position where basically trading off evenly will lead you to a better position. So I would say don't sacrifice, don't go sack crazy on this stuff, and you'll end up in a situation where where you have a winning position. It's great that you won this anyways. Excellent tactics to close this out. I didn't, that rook h1 winning the queen, very nice. But yeah, I think you really cause, difficulties are caused by trading the by trading down that exchange. It was too speculative for such an aggressive thing to do. Anyways, very interesting, Codanova. Thank you very much for sending the game. I really appreciate it. Thanks all for being here. Thank you all for joining the stream. I really appreciate having you here. I appreciate you doing, sticking around while I try to figure out formats that are kind of the most helpful, most instructive. And I think this was interesting. Interesting approach, interesting new idea for a stream, and maybe I'll try that again in the future. Thank you all very much for being here. Thanks for joining the stream. Thanks for participating and for contributing material. And yeah, absolutely. How to play in a closed position. All right, perfect, Pravilo. How about we make that the stream? Let's make that a stream tomorrow morning, Pravilo. Let's make that a stream for so for me it's tomorrow morning, or no, yeah, for me it's tomorrow morning. For you it's a I guess evening. But the next stream for me it will be 8 a.m. Eastern on May 27th. But the next stream we'll do how to play from closed positions, and we'll get that. We'll do that as the stream. Thanks for the suggestion, Pravilo. Next stream at 8 a.m. tomorrow, we'll have a lecture on it, and hopefully that will work. But yeah, thanks, Pravilo. Thanks all for being here. Thanks all for participating, and thank you for the recommendation, Pravilo. I'll add it for tomorrow morning. I like that. Cool. I'm gonna go to bed. Thank you very much all for the being here, and I will see you tomorrow. Thanks very much. I'll talk to you later. Bye.